Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, sir, Paddy. I was just listening to Mr. Martin, and I'm getting a bit sick and tired of Mr. Martin and now Corner Hydro have to take all the criticism for the blackouts when Earl Lidlow and Newfoundland Light and Power and Stan Marshall, Fortis, is walking away from this landscape. You can have all the generation that you want. If your distribution system is not up to scratch, then you're going to have people are going to be in the dark and cold, and this is what happened in January, in February to some degree. What
role did Newfoundland Power play?
Well, when the generation was back or some of it was back in February, there was thousands of customers without power because Newfoundland Light's distribution system, their lines were down, their poles were cracked off, their fuse disconnects in the transformers were gone. They're responsible for 70 or 80% of the distribution system on the island of Newfoundland. And if the distribution system is not there, their feeders are not working, and I was one of them. There's lines around me, all around me down, poles cracked off. And if the distribution system is not there and their feeders are not working, then people are going to be in the dark and in the cold. Now, the reason why this is that Newfoundland Light and Power are not putting the amount of capital investment or the dollars into their capital works to upgrade the distribution system.
But how can we hold people's feet to the fire if the wind blows down a pole?
Well, their poles in Newfoundland Hydro, their distribution poles are replaced every 30 or 40 years. In Newfoundland Light and Power, they're 60 or 70 years old. They're not keeping their system up to par. And what's happening is, the reason they're not, that Fortis is sucking all the money out of Newfoundland Light and Power, investing the money, and getting returns on your money, the people's money, because most of the power money that's going into is not going into hydro.
So are you just...
it's going into Newfoundland Light and Power.
These are two different companies, though, sir.
Yes, but...
You're overlapping it. At some point here, we have to speak to the actual realities of what's going on. Yes, hydro doesn't invest in Fortis, nor do they invest in the repair of poles that they don't own and operate.
But without distribution, you can get all the power you like. I mean, all around St. John's and the Northeast Avalon is distribution. And if Ed Martin can have all the power he wants, if their distribution is falling apart, you're going to be in the dark and in the cold.
Yeah, but you're blaming them. You're blaming them for the quality of the poles. But do we have any evidence that the maintenance schedule of the upkeep or replacement of poles has not been lived up to?
Well, a couple of days ago, a week ago, the generation was up and running, but the east end of St. John's was out, and the Goals was out, and Southern Shore was out. What was going on was because Newfoundland Light and Power's distribution system over in Buckens there last fall, there's 35 poles cracked off. That had nothing to do with generation. That had to do with the distribution system of Newfoundland Light and Power. Now, Fortis is taking all that money and getting return for the shareholders. You and others people are saying that the surplus power that's going to go to Nova Scotia, the money that we're making on that surplus power should come back to the ratepayer. Now, shouldn't the money that Fortis is taking the money out of Newfoundland Light and Power and investing your money?
But they're a private company, though.
But don't make any difference.
It does make a difference.
They work hand in hand.
No, they are a privately operated company that also falls under the authority and the control of the PUB when it comes to approval of commitment of capital repairs, when it comes to holding their feet to the fire for the robust nature and the efficiency and reliability of the system. So I mean, we don't get to play the exact same cards with Newfoundland Power like we do with Newfoundland Labrador Hydro.
That's the problem, because I bet it down in that report, there wasn't one thing said about Newfoundland Light and Power, about their distribution system failing. Because your lights knows how much power Ed Martin got. You can turn that switch on. If the distribution line is not working, you ain't going to get any power and any heat, my man. So you can't blame Newfoundland Light and Hydro for all the problems there in Ed Martin.
But the problem was the generation.
You got to go back to Earl Lidlow and Stan Marshall, who's running the distribution system of this province. And if the distribution system is falling apart, if you can have all the generation that you want, You're not going to have, and you can turn that switch anytime you want. If their feeders are out and their lines are down, like there was in this, even when Ed Martin had all the power back, there was a week or so, there's 5,000 or 6,000 customers were without power for a week or more because Newfoundland and Loughton Power's distribution system feeders were down. Their lines were down. Their poles were cracked off. So they're not putting their money into the capital that they should be doing, but it works hand in hand.
Yeah, you're offering opinion. We try to rely on the reports that come from Liberty, the PUB, Nalcor's own private consultants, and otherwise we can examine Newfoundland Power's through PUB submissions and applications about whether or not they did what they're supposed to do. But you can't just snap your fingers and flick a wand and all of a sudden all the snapped off poles are replaced right away. I don't know how much...
Listen to me for a second.
I have been listening.
But listen to me for one other second.
You can summarize here now and move on.
Because what you're saying, what Earl Lidlow and his representatives were saying in Newfoundland and Loughton Power, you're out of light and you're out of heat because we got no generation from Newfoundland Hydro. They had generation from Newfoundland Hydro, but their distribution systems failed. So in that report, I think that report is totally partly unfair to Newfoundland Hydro because they should have indicated and researched the distribution system here on the island. You can, like I said, you can have all the generation that you like.
I don't think Newfoundland Power has anything to do with this. I really don't. I just don't.
Okay, I'll give you.
If we didn't have power, no more examples. They didn't have power to distribute. That's almost into the story here. There's no power to distribute, so you can't blame it on the distributor.
Teddy, I'll give you one example. If you give me a couple of minutes.
No, I'll give you one. I'll give you 30 seconds.
Last July, Nalcor reduced their rates because of their rate stabilization. They had surplus money in their rates. They reduced the rates by 8%. You didn't get that 8%.
That 8% was a government subsidy.
Newfoundland Loughton Power went to the Public Utilities Board, asked for 7.5%. They got 6.5%. That 8% came over, and your bill.
The 8% came from the provincial government. It was a rebate.
There was no...
It was so.
But that was passed along to Newfoundland Loughton Power.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was. Because
no, it wasn't.
Your rate was...
It's not true.
Reduced. It is true. Because
it's not true.
You take the 8% and take off the 6.5%, and you're getting 1.5% on your bill.
What?
But you should have been getting the 8%.
What? Now, they had a rate application in. They got whatever. They got 6.5%. The 8% you're talking about was a provincial government rebate.
That was the surplus in the rate stabilization plan. They used more water than they used Bunker C. They put a surplus in the rates, and they.
I don't think you understand the whole electrical system.
Listen, my friend, I worked with Newfoundland Hydro for.
Well, then I don't know what capacity you worked in, because you really are boggling and intermingling the realities of life for how you generate and distribute power in this province.
But you can't separate the two.
You can and you must.
But then if the distribution system has failed, you can have all the generation that you got in the world, and you're not going to switch your light and have power.
No, you're not. But I tell you right now, if you got no power to distribute, then there's your problem. The poles can be all cracked off, my son, from here to Buckins, and if there's no juice to go across them, it doesn't matter if the power poles are up or down. I mean, and that's what it came out. The review showed Newfoundland Power is not really an active member or player in the issues that we suffered and faced. That's it. That's how it works.
Well,
that's life. That's life.
Well,
it's not true. It's not true.
I was without power for 10 hours.
Yes, and you just don't understand the relationship between Newfoundland Power and Newfoundland Labrador Hydro.
Because my feeder number 7 was down, and that much power was coming from Hydro. I couldn't have any power.
I appreciate your call this morning. I have to get off to the break, but I do think it's important, as much as it sometimes comes across as PR spin, we all have to understand how the system works before we start to condemn, intermingle, and the interplay between Hydro and Power.
But there should have been, in that report, something about the Newfoundland Hydro's relationship, Newfoundland Power's relationship with Newfoundland Hydro, and if their distribution system wasn't available, they couldn't have lights in their house or heat.
I wish you the best. Thanks for the call.
Okay.
All the best. Bye-bye.